Hi everybody, I am Bonnie Osnes, owner and designer of Lake Girl Quilts in Wisconsin. And I just want to welcome you to this quick little tutorial on how to make 4 at a time half square triangles that you are going to be using in so many different quilt projects that you make. I think half square triangles are probably one of the most common quilt blocks that are incorporated into quilt patterns, and they will save you time and fabric if you can make multiple at a time. So I'm going to show you today how to make 4 of them at a time. And when you are done watching the video, you're going to be able to sign up to get this free little quilt pattern from my website. And you will be able to use this technique then to make this little quilt, which I call Barefoot. Okay, let's get started. Let's go ahead and talk about the tools that you're going to need to have on hand to make your half square triangles. You're going to want to have, of course, your fabric that you've chosen. For my Barefoot quilt, I chose a palette of fall colors with a cream background. I made my quilt scrappy, so I chose different burgundies and greens and blues and oranges. And then I chose one cream colored background to kind of tie them all together and not make it too busy, even though it is a scrappy quilt. So that was just my color palette. Of course, you can go ahead and choose any colors that you'd like. There are no rules when it comes to choosing your colors. Then you're going to want to have a long ruler to cut your squares. I have a 6.5 by 24 inch plastic ruler. And I also have a 6.5 by 6.5 inch square ruler that I'll be using as I cut my 4 half square triangles apart and then trim them down to size. You're also going to want to have a nice sharp rotary cutter on hand, of course a scissors to snip those threads as you're sewing them, and have some straight pins on hand so that you can pin your pieces together and they come out to be nice and uniform in size. You want to have a cutting mat, of course. The other items that you're going to want to have on hand, of course, are your sewing machine, unless you plan on stitching your blocks by hand, and an iron and pressing mat or ironing board. If you haven't tried wool pressing mats yet, I highly recommend giving those a try. They get you nice, crisp seams, and your blocks are going to lay so nice and flat when you use them. As we make our half square triangles, we're going to be cutting them on a bias, and it's a really good idea whenever you're cutting fabric on a bias to start your fabric ahead of time, or at least give it a spray of some finishing spray. I like to use this Faultless Magic finishing spray. I pick it up at my local Walmart, so it's really easy to find. You can get it anywhere near the like laundry detergent or near your ironing supplies section of the department store. So go ahead and give your fabric a spray and an iron before you cut it. That way when you do cut it, it won't stretch wonky when you spray it later. So go ahead and do that, and I have done that already to my fabric that I went ahead and cut here. So the trick to making your 4 at a time half square triangles is cutting your 2 blocks 2 inches larger than you want your unfinished block to end up being. So in this case, I am going to be cutting and trimming 2.5 inch half square triangles. And if I want to make 4 at a time, I want to start out with 4.5 inch squares. So what you'll do is take your 2 squares, place them right sides together, and then go ahead and put a pin in each corner anyway, or at least in 2 corners, so that when you start sewing them together, they don't shift on you. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam all the way around these 2 squares, and we'll come back to see what happens then next. All right, I have got my 2 squares sewn right sides together with that 1/4 inch or so seam allowance all the way around the edges. There isn't any opening in this. They are literally sewn together. So what you will do is take your, you can take either of your rulers. I find it easier to go ahead and use this small plastic ruler. And this is a really nice size for this 4.5-inch block. On the diagonal, it kind of goes edge to edge. And what you'll do is take your rotary cutter, put your ruler so that it meets corner to corner diagonally. And you're going to go ahead and cut this sewn unit apart on the diagonal, just like that. And then go ahead and turn your ruler so that it is going diagonal, corner to corner, matching up the other two opposite corners. So then you will go ahead and you will cut that apart as well. I've seen different tutorials that you could actually draw a line and then cut that apart by hand with your scissors. And you could do it that way too if you'd want to. I think that the method of just using a rotary cutter and your ruler works really well. As long as you're careful, your pieces aren't shifting on you. Just hold your ruler down firm as you're going. And it saves you that extra step of not having to draw that diagonal line and then cut apart on the line. So once you have your 4 sections cut apart, little thread sticking there, always make sure that you put your ruler back down when you're not using it as well. I've found out the hard way that you don't want to have a little edge that you could nick your finger on. Okay, so there are 4 different units. And you'll see when you open them up that they are really cute little half square triangles. Now these are not going to be the exact 2.5-inch half square triangles that I need for my project. I cut those original blocks, remember, 2 inches bigger than my original block needed to be. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give those a press. And I always press towards that darker fabric. So I'm going to go over to my pressing mat and my nice hot iron, and I am going to get each one of these half square triangles pressed with the seam going towards the dark side. And then I'll show you how to go ahead and trim those to the size that you need them to be. So I have finished pressing all of my half square triangles so that that seam is pressing towards the dark side of the fabric half so that you won't be able to see that seam going through the light side when you flip it over. So what we will do then is go ahead and get these trimmed to the size that you need them to be. Again, remember, I needed them to be 2.5 inches. And my original 2 squares that I cut were 2 inches larger than that. They were 4.5 inches. So when I cut them apart, they are going to end up measuring a little bit larger than 2.5 inches. Let's get the right corner on here. And as you can see, these are actually just a little bit bigger than 2 3/4. So let's go ahead and get those trimmed to be the size that we need them to be. I'm going to take off not quite 3/8 of an inch, about a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to find that diagonal line on my ruler, and my 2.5 inch intersecting line is right here. I'm going to slide that diagonal line so that that 2.5 inch intersection is still within the block. But notice here, then I have some overhang on my half square triangles. This is the piece that you're going to go ahead and start trimming off first. So carefully hold your ruler in place. And you're not actually measuring 2.5 inches now. You're just getting 2 sides that you're going to be measuring from. And notice that's pretty minimal that I'm trimming off there, not a whole lot. So then go ahead and you have a square corner to measure from. Flip your half square triangle over. Again, find your intersecting line. I needed mine to be that 2.5 inch measurement. So my intersecting line is right there where that 2.5 inch and 2.5 inch line meet. That is where you're going to place your ruler on the corner of your half square triangle. That's almost finished being measured to size. And because I trimmed and I had a little bit extra over here when I made my first 2 cuts, now I have that overhang on this side. And those are the other 2 sides that you're going to go ahead and get trimmed off. So again, very minimal, but I would rather do this little bit of trimming and have a half square triangle that's really true to size, so that when I'm sewing it into my quilt pattern, I'm going to get my corners matching up, my points are going to meet, and I'm not going to have to worry about being quite so precise when I sew that 1/4 inch seam all the way around those first 2 squares. So go ahead and get all 4 of your half square triangles trimmed to size that you need them to be. And then I'm just going to show you real quickly how to go ahead and start making that bear paw block that, if you are interested in making the barefoot quilt, you'll be able to use in that pattern. All right, I've got my other half square triangles all made, and I just wanted to quickly show you how to go ahead and get started on your barefoot quilt pattern. Again, you can get this free pattern by going to my website. It is https://lakegirlquilts.com. And I'll have that up in the end of the video here so that you can reference that as well. It really is a beginner-friendly quilt pattern. There isn't anything difficult about it. And now by watching this 4 at a time half square triangle tutorial, you'll have a little leg up on anyone else making that pattern. It'll go a lot quicker by making 4 of these half square triangle units at a time. And as you could see, you could use your orange one in all 4 of these center units, and then your green, your red. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is just change up my colors a little bit, and I'm going to use a brown center. So you'll use your half square triangles and arrange them around your brown center that you'll have cut out according to the pattern size that you need. And then you'll cut in a little extra cream square that goes in the corner there as well. And then you'll make smaller half square triangles for each of these little corner pieces that go into the border of your quilt. So again, these little pieces are going to measure 1.5 inch finished. So remember, for any 4 at a time half square triangle that you make, you'll want to cut those 2 original squares 2 inches larger. So for these little corner itty bitty half square triangles that I need to measure 1.5 inches, I will have my 2 original squares cut at 3.5 inches. Have fun making your half square triangles. Have fun going ahead and signing up to get your free barefoot quilt pattern. So thank you for joining me today, learning how to make your cute little half square triangles 4 at a time. And don't forget to go ahead and go to my website and sign up for your free barefoot quilt pattern that you'll be able to use your half square triangles to make. Thank you.